And the prophet said, and lo, the beast looked upon the face of beauty, and it stayed its hand from killing, and from that day it was as one dead. That was an old Arabian proverb. Except, no, it's not. It was completely made up by the filmmakers. Welcome back, cinephiles, to another thrilling episode of Cinema Classics. I am Mike, your guide through the wild and wondrous history of film, ready to chart the cinematic waters. As always, I've got my partner in cinematic crime, the man with opinions as sharp as a pteranodon's talons, DK. You looking forward to this one, buddy?
Absolutely. I mean, after all, how often do we get to talk about giant apes, man-eating dinosaurs, and all manner of monstrous beasts? Well, more often than you think, because this is the second in our monster crossover series, spanning all three silver screen shows. It began on the good old OG Silver Screen podcast earlier in the year with our review of Godzilla vs. Kong. And if you didn't catch that, there'll be a link in the episode description to the YouTube video.
Yeah, that's right. And this time we're going way back to where it all began with the 1933 classic that inspired generations of filmmakers, from Godzilla to Jurassic Park, the OG, the big banana, the towering cinematic beast that showed the world what stop motion effects and ambitious storytelling could really do, the one and the only, the eighth wonder of the world, King Kong. Applause. And speaking of familiar territory, we've reunited what I've affectionately dubbed the Simian Squad. Or primates, I suppose. Seems like every time the three of us get together, something big and hairy is about to go down. Watch it. Last time it was a review of Planet of the Apes. Again, link in the description, where we tackled not just the simian spectacle, but the hidden meaning, the allegories, the bananas. And now I think it's safe to say we're about to go bananas again, as joining us once more is our favorite sci-fi queen herself, mistress of mirth and cosmic commentary, Nita. Welcome.
Hello, gentlemen. How are you guys doing? Thank you so much for having me here.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for coming back to talk all things, the Simian family again after the last.
I love the Simian crew. I love that. It's absolutely excellent. Absolutely excellent.
Yeah, I like to look forward to watching classic films, and it's always nice to have you guys on. So looking forward to this one. DK.
Yeah, so strap in, folks, because this isn't just any giant monster movie. There are meanings to be explored deeper than a spider pit. More on that later. Who can forget that iconic line? It was beauty killed the beast.
Indeed, but you know what? I think it was bad planning killed the tourism industry on Skull Island. Honestly, who signs up for a vacation like that? Come see the native tribes, giant prehistoric creatures. And oh yeah, did we mention the colossal ape who occasionally snatches people off cliffs? Like, no thanks, I'll stick to the beach. Not exactly on TripAdvisor's top 10. But all jokes aside, we're diving into a film that isn't just about the spectacle. It's about the human condition, the nature of power, and how the real monster may not be Kong at all. So buckle up, folks, grab your popcorn, hop on the nearest biplane, and get ready for a wild ride, because the Simian Squad is swinging back into action. Are we ready, guys?
Absolutely.
Go for it.
Let's get monkey.
But before we get too deep into Skull Island and Go Ape, I'm going to start, as we always do, by asking if we can remember the first time that you saw this movie and what impact it had on you. And DK, why don't you start us off?
I can't remember specifically, but I do remember watching it as a young kid. It was on the TV. It was certainly a much more tame version than the full uncut one. It was during that phase where, as a kid, I was really into dinosaurs and stuff like that, and everything I watched kind of revolved around that theme. So there was things like, this and The Lost World and The Land That Time Forgot, Warlords of Atlantis at the Earth's Core, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I couldn't get enough of these things. I'm so old that there was no Jurassic Park back then, and I remember watching this on TV and just being enthralled by it. I do remember watching the remake a little later, the Jeff Bridges, Jessica Lange one, but I can remember, other than, it's based on the story, I can remember virtually nothing about that, but this has always stuck in my mind.
Yeah, I can remember that one cutting out all of the cool dinosaur stuff and me being really annoyed about that. But yeah, that's fair enough. And, what about you, Nita?
Well, I don't. I always loved King Kong, but I don't remember that was the first King Kong that I had ever watched. But I liked it so much that I know that my brother has suggested that we watch the black and white one.
Okay.
The original. He called it the original, right? And I was like, there's no color. I come from color TV. And he goes, yeah, this is a black and white film. And it was a little bit hard to digest because I remember being very young. But it was later on when I, as an adult watching it, that I appreciated the nuances of this film. Although so much is wrong with this film from today's perspective, there is still a lot to be learned from the film itself. So I did appreciate it, I think, better later in life.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I can't remember the specifics either, but like you, DK, I know it was as a child I watched this, because weirdly, my primary first memory of it is having nightmares about King Kong, which is a bit of an embarrassing thing to admit to our current generation, who probably look at this and they were like, what were you scared of? It's clearly like, just a puppet and a bunch of lame effects. But man, I had vivid dreams about Kong like appearing outside my window and stuff when I was younger.
Reaching in and thinking, oh, well, that's not Fay Ray.
That's definitely not Fay Ray. Get out of here, you young kid. But no, I can't remember why I did that. But for whatever reason, I mean, that kind of goes to show it really captured my imagination. So when I saw it, I think, as much as people, like I said, nowadays watching this might look at it and be like, this is primitive, it really captured my imagination, and I suspended my disbelief, and I was like, wow, this is incredible. Because it was probably one of the first things I'd seen that was truly fantastical, that wasn't like a cartoon or, like kids type stuff. So yeah, it was one of the first movies that I really loved. And as I said, my mum is a huge fan of the one you mentioned, the 70s King Kong, and put it on one day because it was going to be on TV. And I was like, oh, cool, they remade it in color. Let's see what this is like. And I just remember being really bitter because there's no dinosaur fights or anything. And I was like, they cut out the best parts. But and I absolutely love the Peter Jackson version. I adore it because it has all of the kind of same beats that are in this one. How we managed to, make it double the length, I'm not quite sure. But other than that, it's very faithful. So yeah, I mean, it's just one of those films that I think has always been ingrained in my DNA. So, and like you, and I think 90% of the population of the world, I went through that same phase that was most of my childhood, being obsessed with dinosaurs,
yes,
toy
absolutely.
dinos and dinosaur encyclopedias naming specific species. And then when Jurassic Park came out, it was like, oh, we've got to go see this.
Who can't love a gigantic ape? That can climb a building. I mean, who doesn't?
I'm going to move us to the next part then, which would always be our behind the scenes section. We've both done our research, myself and DK, and I've split it between the two of us, so you're not hearing just one of us drone on, as I sometimes say. But I'm going to kick us off with behind the scenes info. Hopefully it's not too dull, but there's a lot about this film. And if you have anything you wanted to add to it, or you want to chime in at any time, Nita, feel free, because we're going to be here a while. But there we go. Right, so I'll start by telling you that the production code's stricter decency rules were put into effect in Hollywood after the film's 1933 premiere, and it was progressively censored more and more, with several scenes being either trimmed or excised altogether for the 1938 to 56 re-releases. As DK was alluding to, you've probably seen a cut version. It's only recently that the full 104-minute version has been available, but recently-ish, probably within the last 20 years. But the scenes that were missing were as follows. The Brontosaurus mauling crewman in the water, chasing one up a tree and killing him. Definitely recall that, check. Kong undressing Darrow and then sniffing his fingers. Yes, I definitely remember seeing that this time. Kong biting and stepping on natives when he attacks the village. I did say DK, I did not remember that, so there we go. Kong biting a man in New York. Yes, I recall that. Kong mistaking a sleeping woman for Darrow, dropping her to her death after realizing his mistake. Weirdly, I remember that being in the version I saw when I was younger, so maybe that was a much later cut. An additional scene portraying giant insects, spiders, a reptile-like predator, and a tentacled creature devouring the crew members that were shaken off the log by Kong onto the floor of the canyon below, was deemed too gruesome by RKO, even by pre-code standards, though apparently Mary and C. Cooper also thought it stopped the story, and thus the scene was studio self-censored prior to the original release. The footage is considered lost, with the exception of only a few stills and pre-production drawings. There are also claims it was never filmed and was only in the script and the novelization. I will say that the Blu-ray that I've got, it's the Blu-ray DVD. I think it's something like the Criterion, but not one of those kind of collections. It does have a version of the Spider Pit sequence on it, but it's just a one that's been recreated. So it's like modern people, but the same techniques as back in the 30s. It's okay. It's not remotely gruesome. I kind of don't see what they were talking about with that, but it's worth a look for the sake of the extra, I think, 4 minutes that it adds to the runtime. Excuse me. RKO did not preserve copies of the film's negative or release prints, with the excised footage and the cutscenes were considered lost for many years. In 1969, a 16mm print, including the censored footage, was found in Philadelphia. The cutscenes were added to the film, restoring it to its original theatrical running time of 100 minutes. That's other than the Spider Pit, obviously. This version was re-released to art houses by Janus Films in 1970. After a 6-year worldwide search for the best surviving materials, a further fully digital restoration using 4K resolution scanning was completed by Warner Brothers in 2005 to coincide with Peter Jackson's film. This restoration also had a 4-minute overture added at the start, bringing the overall running time, as I said, to 104 minutes. So you can tell if that's the most up-to-date version by how long it is. The studio authorized the making of one reel to be tested at an upcoming RKO sales meeting. Cooper was quoted by Rudy Belmer in the January 1966 Films in Review magazine, saying the test reel contained a sequence in the jungle showing Kong shaking the tree trunk to make the sailors fall into the chasm and Kong's battle with the Allosaurus, not Tyrannosaurus as is often reported. Cooper emphasized, which had been photographed with a combination of Willis O'Brien's unique model animation and other special techniques. The resulting footage met with great enthusiasm at the sales meeting, and the project was then given the go-ahead. I will say here, I haven't written this down, but again, on the Blu-ray, there is footage of a previous film they were going to make that was called Creation, that Willis O'Brien was working on the effects for. It's like a 5 or 6 minute scene on the Blu-ray, and it's just dinosaur footage and stuff that's in this kind of stop motion-y style. Looks really good though, and it does have a commentary over it by Ray Harryhausen. It also has a commentary on the main movie. So if you're thinking of buying the Blu-ray, that's something that might convince some of us film nerds on that one. Right, so several large detailed drawings were created to dramatically illustrate for Selznick and RKO executives the highlights being planned. The inimitable visual story of Kong was attained largely through the imaginative drawings of Mario Larranaga and Byron Crabb, said Orville Goldner and George E. Turner, authors of the book The Making of King Kong from '75. Working with O'Brien's action outlines and following his order to strive for the dramatic lighting and mood of French artist Gustave Doré, these men, in the course of production, made hundreds of drawings and sketches. They also rendered the glass and background paintings that were an integral part of the miniature settings. That does it for my bit, DK.
Yeah. Somewhat controversially, King Kong was colorized for a 1989 Turner Home Entertainment video release. The following year, this colorized version was shown on Turner's TNT channel. Either of you guys seen that one?
No. I've seen pictures, but
maybe I have seen that one. That actually does sound very familiar.
Mm.
It's possible that I've watched the colorized version of it.
Cool.
Interesting. I always, I have to say I'm not a big fan when they do that, only because I feel like they don't quite get the color right.
No, it never works, really.
No.
It really doesn't.
Evidence indicates that the allegedly conveyed plesiosaur-like appearance of the Loch Ness Monster was inspired by the Brontosaurus in this film. Skeptic Daniel Loxton remarked that a man from London made the first documented claim of seeing a creature akin to a plesiosaur at the loch in August 1933 during King Kong's original theatrical run in his city. The Criterion Collection's 1984 King Kong Laserdisc is the first home video release to ever contain an audio commentary. Kong, his size changes drastically throughout the course of the film. While Marion C. Cooper envisioned Kong as being 40 feet to 50 feet tall, animator Willis O'Brien and his crew built the models and set scaling Kong to be only 18 feet, 5.5 meters, tall on Skull Island, and rescaled to be 24 feet, 7.3 meters, tall in New York. This did not stop Cooper from playing around with Kong's size as he directed the special effects sequences by manipulating the sizes of the miniatures and the camera angles. Cooper said in an interview, "I was a great believer in constantly changing Kong's height to fit the settings and the illusions. He's different in almost every shot. Sometimes he's only 18 feet tall, and sometimes 60 feet or larger. This broke every rule that OB and his animators had ever worked with, but I felt confident that if the scenes moved with excitement and beauty, the audience would accept any height that fitted into the scene. For example, if Kong had only been 18 feet high on the top of the Empire State Building, he would have been lost, like a little bug. The one essential thing was to make the audience enthralled with the character of Kong so that they wouldn't notice or care that he was 18 feet high or 40 feet, just as long as he fitted the mystery and excitement of the scenes and action."
Yeah, cool. Well, I'm going to move us to what we look at next, then, which will be the writing and the plot, because again, I have a lot of stuff about the making of, and I'll jump into us hopefully chatting about it and talking about it, discussing and reviewing and things like that. So I'll start by saying that according to the director Marion C. Cooper, although writer Edgar Wallace received screen credit, he, and I quote, "didn't write any of Kong, not one bloody word." However, it was his idea to give the giant ape human characteristics, which was incorporated. Yeah, apparently he sadly died, the supposed screenwriter, in the course of writing the movie, and a couple of other people worked on it, including, I think, one of the producer's wives had the final say, but more on that later on. Yeah, very odd. Marion C. Cooper became fascinated by gorillas at the age of 6. In 1899, yes, this film is that old, he was given a book from his uncle called Explorations and Adventures in Equatorial Africa. Cooper became fascinated with the stories involving the gorillas, in particular Du Chailu's depiction, and apologies if I've mispronounced that, of a particular gorilla known for its extraordinary size that the natives described as invincible and the king of the African forest. When Du Chailu and some natives encountered a gorilla later in the book, he described it as a hellish dream creature that was half man, half beast. So yeah, white man hadn't seen gorilla before, got frightened. Put it that way. So yeah, for its time, every aspect in this film is innovative. First of their kind special effects, first of its kind plot, famous performances, and a final sequence that remains unequaled as an eye-popping cinematic experience. But again, we'll get into the techniques and specifics of that a little bit later. Yeah, and I think that's, well, I thought I had a bit more, but there we go. That's all I really had other than getting into the discussion topics. So rather than me rambling on all the more, I'm going to throw it open. Nita, you've kind of had to be quiet while we rambled for this long. So do you have any thoughts on the writing and the plot that you wanted to start us off with?
Oh, yes. One of the things that I immediately noticed in the writing and plot section is in the very beginning, when he's having a conversation with the casting director, I'm going to call him, and saying, well, we can't find you, a dame, a woman to take the part.
Yeah.
And he's like, do you think I want a woman in my movie? Like, it was apparently some sort of big deal to have women on set. And it didn't seem to have raised issues for him, and he was determined to go get him a woman even if he had to marry one. And he literally finds this actress who is in kind of dire straits kind of situation because she's stealing an apple because she's so hungry and she's broke. And you see the scene where there's the the food kitchen, the soup kitchen for women, which in those days, soup kitchens in New York City were either male or female. They were separate. So that was actually quite true to, what was happening. And he just pays for the apple and grabs her and puts her in a cab and and she just goes. She didn't say, hey, I appreciate you paying for this apple, but I'm not going with a stranger anywhere, you know? I found that really strange that even in that time that women wouldn't hesitate and go, hold on, I don't know you, because the
Yeah.
image that women had to present, that would have been a moment to pause as a woman. No, I cannot go with a strange man and be seen in a car. What would people think? That would be something a woman would be thinking in 1933. So I found it really interesting that they made her so submissive, like to an extreme.
I think I agree with you 90% of the time. I do think I'm kind of relieved that there's at least a scene where Denham kind of has to sort of say to her, "Don't worry, I'm on the level. There's nothing shady going on," because she doesn't just
I
immediately
like
as soon as
that.
he's like,
Yes.
he's like,
Yes,
"No, I'm
I
a director.
like
I'm
that.
looking for an actor, so that's what the situation is." And kind of, okay, at least she had the sense to ask, as opposed to just like, "You coming on a boat? Yeah, sure, why not?"
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Because she doesn't technically ask, she insinuates. Because, in those days, a lady wouldn't ask such things, but she is concerned. And I think that eventually, after she was fed, uh, she was like a little bit more lucid and said, okay, this is kind of weird. And I like that he addressed that. That he was bold.
Most of the rest of the stuff I have to add on the kind of depiction of women, though, is negative. And I will say, even in that scene, it bugged me that he was kind of like, I'm looking for an actress. You'll fit in the clothes. And when she asks what she has to do, he's kind of like, don't worry about it. Just stand there and look pretty, kind of thing. And not literally, but more or less. And I'm just kind of like,
that's basically what he said.
It's giving her nothing of what the actual acting role entails. He's like, just, do some reactions, scream. And she's like, oh, fair enough. All right.
Yep. I do have to say that the first mate's reaction to having a woman on the ship was actually quite normal in those days. Sailors were known to be superstitious, and they felt that having a woman on a ship was bad luck. Yeah. So that's why for years and years and years, you didn't have women on ships. And because they felt it was bad luck, they felt it brought on evil to their journey. So I can understand that he had that superstition. And I like the fact that they actually brought that to light. But what I didn't like was that trope of, if he's mean to me, he likes me, because he was not very nice to her.
I was just going to say that.
Not at all.
It's proper playground BS. Excuse me, where it's kind of like, oh yeah, I pulled her hair and pushed her down, so I must kind of like her, and I'm just like,
exactly.
Oh, this is horrible.
Not saying, hey, you shouldn't be doing that to another person. That's not how we express how we feel. But they were given to that trope of, he's mean to her, so that means that he likes her, and she just kind of falls for him immediately,
which is so annoying, because you just kind of feel like any woman nowadays would just slap the guy and be like, you've been nothing but rude to me, you jerk.
Exactly. 100% I'm with you. I felt very offended by her behavior. I don't even think in 1933 a woman would have just been like, I'm gonna get on a boat with a bunch of men that I don't know, for a scene that I don't know what I'm doing, and if you're mean to me, I'm gonna fall in love with you. I don't know that actually went
I think it probably would have been more likely than you think, sadly. I think there was a lot of
I hope I'm wrong. I hope you're wrong, but I don't think I don't know.
I think it's one of those things where the men had the status, so it was kind of like they could behave however they wanted, and just giving a woman attention, even if it was negative, was just like, oh, he saw me, kind of thing. And it's kind of
exactly.
It's horrible now looking back on it,
because even King Kong's behavior had that tone to it. Yes. Where he was killing everything and everyone in his sight except the girl he wanted. But she lived in fear. She was terrified.
Absolutely.
Around
I will
him.
Say, we often go over our favorite lines and things and moments, but I have to mention one of my least favorite here, which is, as you said, the moment when we're supposed to kind of believe that Driscoll and Anne are falling in love, and the way he responds, the way he says it by just, gee, I guess I love you.
Yeah.
She
know.
responds, but Jack, you hate women. And he replies with the worst, most nonsensical line, yeah, but you're not women. She's just like, I watched that this time and was like, what the flip does that even mean? It's just
Exactly.
nonsense.
Exactly. It was just this whole ridiculous idea that a sailor couldn't possibly, like anyone, and that he was mean and rugged, and
Yeah.
this over sense of I am a man, therefore you must need protection, and I'm going to give it to you whether you like it or not.
It's kind of annoying that she, like you mentioned the first time that they meet, when she's kind of accused of stealing an apple and he pays for it. And I groaned immediately because she immediately faints. And I was just like, oh God, we've started as we mean to go on. It's like, there's no reason for you to
Yeah.
faint there. Nothing particularly stressful has happened. And it's just like,
Yes.
oh
You're
my
not
word.
that hungry looking. Like, how hungry are you? Like,
Even at the very end when Denham's like, we've got something Kong wants. Like, I'm glad it didn't come to them using her as bait in that way, but the fact that he was even willing to. And again, she's not even complaining about it. They're still friends later. I'd have been like, dude, you know you were going to try and use me to lure the giant gorilla, right?
yes,
Anyway.
exactly. You could have killed her.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well. Anyway, DK, you've had to be very quiet while we've rambled on there. So is there anything you wanted to
No,
bring
it's
up about? Right.
I mean, you guys have brought up points that I had anyway, but the one that you haven't mentioned is even at the end where they're on stage and he introduces Anne Darrow.
Yeah.
And then at the moment that he's introduced her, soon to be married to
Yes.
This guy, and you just think, oh, yeah, we'll instantly dismiss her and just get him on board.
Fiance of this dude. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Which I thought was weird because what does their engagement have anything to do with her acting in the movie? Like, it has no valid
it was to show
point.
It was a love story, because that's what they say
Exactly.
at the start, isn't it? Like, oh, this picture would do better with a love story, and it was to show, like, look, they fell in love.
And
now
that was another issue there that was really interesting, because they were sort of saying that the only roles women couldn't do at the time were love stories. If you had a woman in a movie, it had to be a love story. No other reason.
Though, yeah.
Yeah.
There's no other reason. Women can't be doing anything else, of course. What we're going to do, filming them cooking and cleaning and stuff? That would be boring.
Exactly.
That's all women do all day, isn't it? So, yeah. Oh man, the attitudes of the past. Thankfully, we've moved on a little bit. But yeah. Speaking sadly about outdated attitudes and horrible things, as well as the treatment of women, I kind of have to address some of the incredibly intense racism that's present in the movie. Oh my word. Just the fact that Skull Island is within itself just one big kind of allegory of colonialism, and like, ooh, we've come here to tame these savage black people, and just kind of, oh, it's horrible watching it nowadays. And they've never seen a blonde golden woman before, and they have no value for women. They just want to trade 10 of their women for Anne. And I'm just like, oh, for God's sake. And then they mention, like, oh, there's a witch doctor doing a ritual because they're so primitive and they're up to their evil tricks. And I'm just like,
oh God. And that scene where they have like ape arms.
Yeah.
And even before that, with, I believe it's Charlie on the boat.
Oh, Charlie as a whole is just like, because he's Chinese, he has to start every sentence with, me no like this, or some kind of really terrible.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And it's interesting, he has to be the cook.
Yep.
Yes.
We never see another potato, but you're gonna mention his horrendous line after Anne's being captured, I assume, DK here.
Go on. I'll let you do it.
The fact that he says crazy black man being here.
Yeah. Gee.
There's got to be a better way to word that.
I
mean, really?
I know you mentioned earlier that, you look back on it with modern sensibilities, and that's just the way it was at the time. But shit. Come on.
Yeah, there's times when you've got one racist caricature making an incredibly racist statement, and you're just like, did nobody see this? God, just think, yeah, maybe we'll step back a little bit from some of that. But as you said, I think
but here's the thing. I mean, who was writing and producing and casting these movies? White males who didn't want to shake the status quo. And if that meant depicting people in blackface or depicting every black person as subservient, um,
Yeah.
and every brown person as, some sort of illegal alien to the country,
Or like savage, or
undocumented person.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, exactly, and doesn't speak English. Then that's what they did, because
yeah,
they didn't rock the boat the way we do today. They just
yeah.
didn't. And
It's so
that's
hard
what's
to look
really
back.
been harmful in Hollywood.
Yeah, definitely, and it's
Mhm.
part and parcel of a much bigger problem and much worse things that were
Yeah.
led up to King Kong. There's rumors and speculation that part of the reason that it was made was because exploitation films were going around at the time that involved black people that were comparing them to apes, and this horrible film
Yes.
I won't even mention that was just kind of like, oh, a black man and a white woman, and it gave birth to a gorilla or something, and it's just like, what the fuck are we doing?
What the
Yeah.
hell is that?
Yeah.
It's called something like Ingagi or something, and it was like massively popular in the 20s because, like I
Hmm.
said, people had no idea what like gorillas and that kind of wildlife that we don't really
Well,
have.
the idea, I know what you're talking about, actually.
Yeah,
That film, it was because they wanted to discourage interracial
yeah,
relationships and saying, oh, this is what happens when you mix race. And because in that time, it was actually illegal in most, if not all, of the United States to marry
yeah,
someone who was of a different race. And if things were happening where people started mixing, and they were saying, oh, let's discourage this by saying XYZ, these horrible
hmm,
things. And this was actually a real thing. And it shows you the power that, media has, because people started to believe that. And I think that's
yeah.
why today, the conscientious films that we have today that are more mindful is it's really impacting the way young people think and feel.
Oh yeah, definitely. I
The
mean,
thoughts were always there, okay? The thoughts of inequality in women and black people, in Latino people, they were always there. We always saw it. The lack of representation, the lack of proper representation, we always saw it there, but no one was allowed to say anything, because you lived in fear that if you said something, you will be outcast. And it was just so true in Hollywood. It was so easy to be outcast in Hollywood back in those days.
Well,
it's
it's
just
it's
awful.
interesting that now you have more
Hmm.
representation. The outcry from a certain subsection of society that instantly brands anything like that, with female or a person of color as
Hmm.
woke, and you get the strong impression that they would love to go back to the
Hmm.
Yes.
1933 attitude, and yeah, we
Hmm.
don't want to go back.
No,
Well,
we're
I mean,
supposed to move forward in life, not go backwards.
yeah, I mean, I almost don't want to bring it up because it's horrific and horrendous. But this is where you get the kind of this horrible idea that, oh, black people are so much lesser. They're practically not human. They are like more like gorillas and apes
Yes.
and things. And the
Yes.
way they were drawn in cartoons with those kind of features, which is just makes me physically sick
Hmm.
nowadays.
And
Kong
they always
himself,
say, "Oh, it was just a harmless depiction," but it's all that label, a harmless depiction, always comes from, again, that certain subsection that
yeah,
Yeah.
oh yeah,
have that privilege, and
yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
it's
there's better ways to do it. We've seen
maddening.
better ways since then. With Skull Island is featured in modern movies and in Peter Jackson's version, and they didn't have to do, the racist tropes and stereotypes, so it was clearly possible.
Yeah,
But I mean, even Kong himself, a lot of people have speculated the idea of him is kind of fear of the other, which could refer to any kind of minority or anything that you look on as not being particularly the same as you, or not
Yeah.
being human, or not being worthy. Thankfully, we've moved on, and you are at least able to look at this if you want to as a literal big gorilla, which
Yeah.
you kind of draw affection for. I think at times, certainly in the more modern versions, you do anyway. But yeah, and I do
I
like that
mean,
it
I
kind of.
think
Sorry.
he's almost like, for me, looking now at the movie, I don't see King Khan as the bad guy. I think he was
No.
portrayed as the bad guy, but he really was a victim. He was minding his business in his neck of the woods, living his life, not bothering anyone. He had this unspoken agreement with the tribe,
Yeah.
and they had their And just because the agreement was something you couldn't understand, you wanted to literally blow him up because he came prepared to capture and conquer him and colonize him, so to speak, because he
Yeah.
didn't behave the way you thought he should have behaved.
I mean,
You,
I don't
yeah,
love the concept
yeah.
that he must have basically been taking a sort of sacrifice every so often, because God knows what
Oh,
he was doing
yeah.
with them.
That's, I think that he just wanted companionship. I think
I'm not so
Kong
sure about that. The way that they're
wanted
tying up women and like,
companionship.
he'll leave
I
us
think
alone if we sacrifice a woman to him every few months. It's kind of like, oh dear, I don't really need to know. 'Cause
Yeah,
he
and
did
know,
for
must
a
be
I
something
think
more.
part, I'm glad we didn't see just like a pile of corpses over in the
Yeah,
corner. Or something.
exactly.
no, I don't know that he was eating them though. I think that I got the impression that he was lonely and wanted the friendship because he was very protective and made sure he killed anything that tried to
Yes.
hurt her. That's why I don't know that he was like eating them. I think that he was just okay, this is my friend, my companion. Um but they were depicting him as a predator. But the reality is the humans were the predators.
Yes. No, I'm glad you said that, because that was the other thing I was going to mention, is that, on the more positive side in terms of representation, Kong could just represent a fear of like the untamed world of nature, and the way that we're
Yeah,
trying to, in that era, we were trying to kind of industrialize everything, and we were building more and more. And there was potentially a fear of like, what if nature strikes back at us because we're kind of, I don't know, felling the rainforest or whatever was happening at that time. So there
exactly.
was a degree of that. And as you said, Kong, there's actual depth and a bit of pathos to the character. He is portrayed a lot of the time as sympathetic, as the defender and protector. Okay, there's other moments, like I said, I could live without potentially what's happening to the sacrifices, or him pulling people out of their huts and stamping on them and eating sailors and things. But like, I suppose that's the way they would look at it, as like, whoa, because he's beast. Which is the other point, which I kind of need to ask what you guys think of, because I'm kind of fond of the kind of the allegory to the Beauty and the Beast motif, not necessarily because of what it says, but just I think it was an interesting way to phrase that. Like, ultimately, what's more powerful, women's beauty or turning man into a beast, or whatever, that kind of thing. It's an interesting thing to explore. DK, what did you make of any of this?
Yeah, it's a good allegory to surround the framework of. I do think, again, we're going back to attitudes. I do think with regards to Anne in this version, they kind of slipped up a bit, because she's, as Nita said, she's incredibly submissive to just pretty much everyone. So Kong doesn't feel like a standout in that regard. He just feels like another in a long line of people that just take Andaro for granted.
Oh, completely, yeah. And it's just the fact that he's like, oh, I own this woman now. How dare you take her away? And it's kind of, I mean, that sounds silly to say, but like you say, it's another man that's like, where are you going? You're my woman. And not like, well, ask if she wants to stay with you first, dude. It's not like, I don't care if you want to stay here or not, you're mine, It's just.
Yeah, and I think in I say in subsequent movies, I don't, as I say, I don't remember the 70s one, but when you look at the Peter Jackson one, there is an affection there that's seen from Anne's side.
Yes,
it's more. She has more agency.
Yes, there's much more of a love story sort of element to the, even if it's it's not naturally, it's not like physical kind of love, but there's definitely affection there. Like there's the really sweet scene, not that we're reviewing this one, but the scene of them on the cliff top, like watching the sunrise or sunset, and you can see there's genuine affection there, and she's not afraid of him, and yeah, it's a lot more meaningful than, like you say, Jack taking her away from the cliff edge while Kong's fighting a pterodactyl, and him just being like, "Get back here, you! She's mine." Which is a bit crap. But yeah,
I think that in those days, in 1933, the idea that women were gentle and kind and their beauty can tame a man was something that they were trying to definitely spread. And I think people believe that trope very much. But I don't think it was true, because violence against women, beautiful women, ugly women, whatever kind of women, existed. And it was not something women was embracing. It was not something women were okay with. But it was happening, and there was no resources for them like they are today. In today's writing, that would not be a trope that would be very much embraced by the public of women. I don't think, in my opinion, I think that women today are more um, courageous and can say, yeah, we don't want to be viewed as someone who would embrace something like that. But at the same time, it's a survival mechanism. And if she had maybe fought Khan more, um, would she have survived? I don't know that she would have. I think that the way they were writing King Kong, had she fought him more, had she tried to escape more, had she tried to go against him, he would have
Yeah.
turned on her.
Don't be
Um,
silly, Nita. She can't
yeah.
escape him on her own. She has to have the man come and
She
rescue her.
is not the man, save her. Yes. And I think that I think this movie depicted a lot of tropes that we don't see as much today, but it is definitely important that we watch these old movies and we appreciate the change that the world has made.
Yeah.
Because media, television, movies have an impact on how we see society, because it tells us how people in power see society. And if they're seeing women as strong and valiant, and not taking, this gorilla's nonsense, or a man's nonsense, because in today's day, she would have punched the guy back for hitting her. She just wouldn't have
Yeah.
taken it. Um, and I think that that's important. And I think that's why these movies are relevant and important, just as
Yeah.
they are.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it's a conversation that we need to have rather
Hmm.
than kind of sweeping them away and getting rid of them completely. But I have to say, I think when it comes to the Beauty and the Beast thing, I didn't necessarily read it as negatively as you did, which maybe just like I said, the naivety of when I first watched this as a child. But I do think it's interesting that they've kind of kept that, that kind of key theme even in the more modern, more progressive versions. Because to me, I think it speaks more to the idea of you can be as kind of rugged and stubborn and traditional quote unquote manly as you like, but ultimately love will get you in the end. So I kind of see it as kind of a nice and almost kind of, I guess, soliloquy on the kind of nature of love and what it will eventually, it's powerful enough that if you don't embrace it properly, it could kill you, I guess, or whatever. But it's an interesting way to look at it anyway, for me, and I think it can certainly be read that way as opposed to, some of the more negative aspects that you were looking at. But which isn't to say that they aren't there. Like I said, unfortunately, in the 30s, that may have been how they were intended. But anyway.
Exactly.
But yeah, speaking of the kind of 30s context, the last thing I was going to mention is it's also very telling to me that Peter Jackson in 2005 set his version of King Kong at the same time. He set it in 1933 again, like the original movie. And I think that's because the kind of Great Depression context is also relevant. You've got people desperate, like you said, you see a soup kitchen, you see women starving, and she's desperate enough, that she wants to go and act. And, the wild glitz and glamour of Hollywood is this other world to them. And just at the very end, as I said, the way that, okay, it's a metaphor for colonialism when they drag Kong back, but it's also like, he's the big box office show. He's the draw. He's going to make them all super rich. There's 10 grand in the box office. The tickets were $20 each and everything. And it's kind of, again, to an audience in the Great Depression, it was, in a way, it was kind of like what happened with this film. Like people were desperate for escapism. And even though,
Yes.
things were horrendous and apparently, movie theaters were about to shut down, then this film came out and it had screenings kind of round the clock because people were just all going to see it because life was depressing and they wanted a little bit of escapism from it. And this was an hour and a half of 145 of just let's just forget our things and live this fantasy and this spectacle for a little bit. And like I said, that's exactly what's happening with the patrons that see Kong live, foolishly, because ultimately he escapes, as we all knew he would. But yeah, so do you guys think there's kind of anything in that? Do you think I'm maybe reading a lot in, or did you kind of see that that historical context as well?
Oh, no, absolutely. That's definitely something that I can see people experiencing. During the depression, you need hope. And I think that one of the things that this movie provided was a sense of hope.
Right. So we'll move to the acting then, and I believe, DK, you've got some stuff to start us off with that.
Yeah, close-ups of the pilots and gunners of the planes that attack Kong were shot in the studio with mock-up planes. The flight commander is Marion C. Cooper, and his observer is Ernest B. Schoedsack. They decided to play the parts after Cooper said that we should kill the son of a bitch ourselves.
I love that. I never knew it was them until I read that for this.
Yeah. Anne Darrow, obviously played by Fay Wray, Cooper approached Hollywood actress Fay Wray. He said, apparently, you will have the tallest, darkest leading man in Hollywood. Those were the first words I heard about King Kong, she recalled, for the New York Times in 1969, confessing that she expected Clark Gable or Cary Grant, not a giant primate. She added, we decided you could wear a blonde wig. We've got to have that contrast. I had already worked with the team of Cooper and Schoedsack in Four Feathers and had great regard for them. Cooper hired Ruth Rose, Schoedsack's wife, to do the final drafts of the script. Rose had worked with Cooper and Schoedsack in Africa on the Four Feathers and had gone to Sumatra with Schoedsack to film Rango. Although she had done some professional writing, Rose had never written a screenplay, but Cooper felt that she knew from experience what entailed to be part of a dangerous expedition. Put us in it, Cooper told her. Give it the spirit of a real Cooper Schoedsack expedition. Cal Denham, played by character actor Robert Armstrong, the motion picture director, was suggested by Cooper and Jack Driscoll. The first mate, played by newcomer Bruce Cabot, was somewhat patterned after Schoedsack, and Cooper and Schoedsack's formula for their past projects, the 3Ds, distant, difficult, and dangerous, should be emphasized. And that's all I've got.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, we've talked a little bit about some of the acting, so I'm going to, I'll open the floor up and say, first of all, I think we've said a lot about this already, but Fay Wray is kind of the takeaway from this film, the big star. She's the name everybody still knows, even if it's just from the Rocky Horror song that we were discussing just a few weeks ago, DK, she's mentioned in science fiction double features. But yeah, so like she is kind of considered to be the quintessential scream queen in that way. Although I will say on the commentary on the Blu-ray, she kind of says that, as much as she's grateful for the role and she loved working with everybody, watching it, with more modern eyes, all she does is faint and scream, and she kind of looks back on it a little bit like, yeah, maybe not the best. But
yeah, she should have agreed with us.
Yeah, basically, yes. I think she's passed away now, but this, when the kind of commentary was recorded, yeah, she was kind of looking back like, yeah, really all this character does is a kind of rubbish. It's just scream around. But I mean, she did become iconic, whether it's because of the appearance, the way she portrayed that version of the character. She did give it her all, to be fair to her. Did you have any thoughts on that, Nita, about Fay Wray in the movie, other than kind of the more negative stereotypes?
I think that she did what she had to work. And there weren't a lot of roles for women. And she took the role that, was presented to her. Who knows what her struggle was. And, especially during the Great Depressions, finding roles and, that mentality of having women in films, that was a reality for women. That wasn't just that movie saying that was a reality for actresses. And I think that she got a role that was different, got a role that portrayed, women in not necessarily a romantic light, because that wasn't what the idea was, even though they kind of added a little romance to it. But I think that, if she has to get known for screaming, then do it in a movie that's gonna make you some money. And I think that this movie gave her the notoriety that she needed to continue in her career. And she really started an amazing franchise.
I think she's actually a really decent actress. I mean, it would have been easy to cast.
Too.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt that she is obviously beautiful and was cast presumably at least in part for her looks. But she actually gives, for me, probably the best performance of the actors in the film. She's the more kind of naturalistic in a performance and doesn't seem as forced. And
absolutely,
she doesn't have a lot to do, but I think I kind of fall more for her character, I think, than almost any of the others. It's just
Yeah,
a
I
shame
think
that
that she's a
script doesn't give
fantastic actress.
Yeah.
It takes a lot to do. I don't want to downplay a scream in a movie,
Yeah.
in a fear movie.
Oh yeah.
It takes a lot of energy to scream. Have
Also
you ever
reacting to
been
something that's not there. You know?
Exactly. That's a fear reaction.
There's not really a lot of other people in the film that you can say a lot about, because we don't want to get into every one of the small background characters. A lot of them are borderline offensive, as we said, like, unfortunately, Charlie the Cook. But in terms of like Robert Armstrong and Bruce Cabot, I think there's times when they're very stilted, particularly Bruce Cabot. I think he said it's like his first role. He was a newcomer. To me, that kind of shows he doesn't come across particularly confident, and he's not super believable. And whenever him or even Robert Armstrong have to give exposition, it comes across clunky. And I don't think that's entirely the script. I think it's partly their delivery. I noticed it very, like, straight away when they're talking to the old chap and they have to deliver this long thing about, like, explaining, this is the expedition that we're going on, and it's called Denham and blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, this is terrible. This is really bad.
Agreed.
I will say that Robert Armstrong's performance did grow on me, though, as Carl Denham. I think he kind of eased into it. So certainly from the moment you arrive on the island to the end of it, he was a lot more believable. Like I said, with the exception of that one thing when he was considering using Anne as bait, and I was like, whoa, this is coming from nowhere. This character's been fairly likable for the most part until now. And then all of a sudden it's just kind of like, we've got something he wants. And I'm like, dude, chill. But yeah, other than that, I kind of
they portrayed him very aggressive, as I gotta get the movie. That this hyper aggression about getting the movie at all costs. That's all go well and good until you put someone's life in danger.
Yeah,
I like the jerk.
I like the aspect of him that was kind of like he's a workaholic for filmmaking. Because I really like I like the little touches, like when he's mentioning, he says that story about the reason that he kind of films everything himself, which involves cranking a camera because it's 1933. The reason he does it himself rather than use a cameraman is because the cameraman he used once when he was filming somewhere got charged by a rhino and didn't stand their ground because they were terrified. And he was like, it was ridiculous. He was perfectly safe. If it had been me, I would have gotten it all on film, but this coward just ran away.
I will say there are two standouts for me. You've mentioned both Robert Armstrong and Fay Wray. Fay Wray, I think, is the best at acting simply for that scene where she's first given her instruction on the deck, and he tells her, you see something, you glimpse, you look up, and it absolutely terrifies you. You really get the sense of an actress from the silent era. The way she performs that, I think she did really well. I think that's the best bit of acting in the entire movie.
Oh, absolutely.
Fair enough. I'm going to move to the direction because I have a huge amount for this. I genuinely do. So I'm going to try and get through it as I can, as quick as I can. As an adult, Cooper became involved in the motion picture industry while filming The Four Feathers in Africa. He came into contact with a family of baboons, which gave him the idea to make a picture about primates. So it was kind of literal. A year later, when he got to RKO, Cooper wanted to film a what he called terror gorilla picture. As the story was being fleshed out, Cooper decided to make his gorilla giant-sized. He stated that the idea of Kong fighting warplanes on top of a building came from him seeing a plane flying over the New York Insurance Building, which was then the tallest building in the world. He came up with the ending before the rest of the story, as he stated, without any conscious effort or thought, I immediately saw in my mind's eye a giant gorilla on top of the building. Cooper was also influenced by Douglas Burden's accounts of the Komodo dragon, which you see in the film, certainly, and wanted to pit his terror gorilla against dinosaur-sized versions of these reptiles. Why? It's something from the dinosaur family. Speaking of great dialogue. He stated to Burden, I also had firmly in mind to giantize, that's a word, both the gorilla and your dragons to make them really huge. However, I always believed in personalizing and focusing attention on one main character, and from the very beginning I intended to make it the gigantic gorilla no matter what else I surrounded him with. Around this time, Cooper began to refer to his project as a giant terror gorilla picture featuring a gigantic semi-humanoid gorilla pitted against modern civilization. Cooper described Kong in a 1930 memo. His hands and feet have the size and strength of steam shovels. His girth is that of a steam boiler. This is a monster with the strength of 100 men, but more terrifying is the head, a nightmare head with bloodshot eyes and jagged teeth set under a thick mat of hair, a face half beast, half human. However, when it came time for O'Brien and Marcel Delgado to sculpt the animation model, Cooper decided to backpedal on the half-human look, thank Christ, for the creature and became adamant that Kong be a gorilla. Keeler heads prevailed, I guess. O'Brien, on the other hand, wanted him to be almost human-like to gain audience sympathy. When told Delgado to make that ape almost human, Cooper laughed at the end result, saying that it looked like a cross between a monkey and a man with very long hair. Oh, I wish I could have seen that. For the second model, O'Brien again asked Delgado to add human features, but to tone it down somewhat. The end result, which was also rejected, was described as looking like a missing link. Disappointed, Cooper stated, "I want Kong to be the fiercest, most brutal, monstrous damn thing that has ever been seen." On December 22nd, 1931, Cooper got the dimensions of a bull gorilla from the American Museum of Natural History, telling O'Brien, "Now that's what I want." When the final model was created, it had the basic look of a gorilla, but did manage to retain some human-like qualities. For example, Delgado streamlined the body by removing the distinctive paunch and rump of a gorilla. Again, you can see the difference in the Peter Jackson version, which adds those back. O'Brien would incorporate some characteristics and nuances of an earlier creature he created in 1915 for the silent short, The Dinosaur and the Missing Link, into the general look and personality of Kong, even going so far as to refer to the creature as Kong's ancestor. When it came time to film, Cooper agreed that Kong should walk upright at times, mostly in the New York sequences, in order to appear more intimidating. And relax. That's I got through it. So yeah, again, I'm going to throw it open then. Do you guys have any thoughts on the direction that we haven't talked about yet from the movie?
I don't really have anything with regards to the direction. I do like the silhouettes of the Empire and Kong at the end, and I think that's a really well directed scene. I do think the matte painting work is exceptional.
Oh, it's stunning.
Where they're rowing up to the island and you see the wall, and you've got the birds flying over both the live shot and the matte painting, and it just looks amazing. It's more a special effect rather than a direction, but the fact that they were putting the animated Kong over the arm holding Fay Ray, and it looked really well done. So there are some good shots in this.
There's a lot of the close-ups, I think, like I said, that really, for me, certainly as a kid, I think that kind of added to the realism for me, because even if it seems at times like you can almost tell now, knowing what we know now, that, you know, it's just something projected on a backdrop when Kong's there, even if there's something in the foreground, like during the log sequence and stuff. But then when it cuts to, you know, the actual head, the fact that you can see that there's something there and it's three-dimensional, I think, because the two things are put together, your mind fills in the gaps and you're like, oh, it is real. That was really there. It just looked distant or whatever. So I do think I kind of agree it was innovative to kind of combine these techniques to give it a bit of realism, even if, like I said, the kind of sculpted head doesn't look like the one on the model. It's you know, it still adds a little bit to me. Like I said, as a kid, you don't really notice or care. You just think, big gorilla, and have nightmares, apparently. So, any thoughts from you, Nita, about the direction?
I think that, you know, they did a really good job, considering it was 1933. They didn't have the technology that we have today. They did a really amazing job making him look so real. And you know, the details that they added, and there was slight differences, and, you know, the technology didn't allow them to show as, you know, to be like seamless like it is now, but it is still an amazing feat of technology of the times. I think that they did a pretty fantastic job in, you know, keeping the scenes, you know, as really, how would I put this? You know, as realistic as they could with the technology that they had. I think they did a really good job. I don't really have anything negative to say. I try to consider the fact that it is 1933. You know, all of these things were things they had to build. There was no CGI. There was nothing technological or computerized. Everything had to be built. And when you're doing that, you're bound to make a mistake or two, and things are bound not to be as perfect. And I like that because it shows that imperfection. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing.
No,
You
not at
know,
all.
it shows how real, you know, and raw it is.
Yeah, I mean, you got to remember we're rapidly approaching a century since this was made, so
Yeah.
it's going to look very primitive by modern standards. But I still think there's something. It's almost more charming and better, almost to me. And I'm sure DK, you'd probably agree to the kind of stop motion and these techniques. I kind of prefer this in a lot of ways to the CGI.
Oh God,
I
definitely.
agree.
I will always prefer physical effects over CG.
I'm with you guys. I love the physical effect. I love that with a movie like this, you can do that. You know?
Yeah, completely. But like you said, I mean, on a directing level, you've got to remember this was they were making what became iconic imagery. So things like the kind of Fia Ray tied up as the sacrifice was something that became like an image ingrained in people's minds. Or like you said, they had to build things like the giant Jurassic Park gates wall. You know, they had to build that, and it had to actually be there. They couldn't just make a model of it because you had to have, you know, tons of extras interacting with it. So yeah, I loved all that. And I will say there was one scene that really impressed me that I still don't know how they did. So, you know, again, for being as old as it is, 91 years old, and there's a scene where, you know, Fia Ray is screaming and everything, and Kong first approaches her. Then he picks her up, and I'm like, how the heck did they do that? Like, I could understand she's probably there, and like there's a back projection of Kong or whatever, and then he's maybe holding or picked up a doll or something, but I did not see the transition between the two. So to me, it was like,
Correct.
wow,
They did a good job with that.
incredible.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I love all, without getting too far into it, I love all of the dinosaur fight scenes. Even though, like I said, you may look at them now as primitive, I could just watch those back, especially that first Allosaurus / T-Rex fight. I love that fight. I love.
I thought it was a T-Rex too. You know, I was one of those people who thought it was a T-Rex.
Everybody calls it a T-Rex, but Cooper insists it's an Allosaurus. But I think most people just call it that.
I don't remember much specifically from when I watched this as a kid, but I always remember that fight because even though it's done much better, obviously in the Jackson version, there's something about the way he breaks his jaw and the blood's oozing out of it that's always stuck with me ever since I was a child.
Yeah. It's surprisingly brutal, but on another level, I kind of love when you realize how long it takes for like stop motion animation. Like every little thing takes hours to days. I love that they add little touches like Kong after he snapped the jaw, doing the little mocking, like snappy motion with it. I was like, they didn't have to add that, but it adds kind of character and personality, even though it would have taken them probably ages to animate just that little bit of extra action. And, you know, the fights, the wrestling moves he does on the big dino is really cool. If I'm super critical, there's moments, I'm sure there's a name for this, but like when the brontosaurus that's in the water attacks the men, you can really see the outline of the men around them. I forget what that's called. It's like ghosting or something. But yeah, so at that point I was like, oh, that's a shame. But that was the only time I really kind of noticed.
I do have to give a special shout out to the idiot that ran up the tree. Because that's pretty much like running upstairs in a haunted house. It's, you know, I'll get closer to mouth level. That'll do it.
That was one of the scenes that was cut for a while, but I mean, that scene though was great. It looked like the Bronto was interacting with the kind of tree in the foreground, and I don't know. I know there's a stop motion jank, for want of a better word to call it, but I kind of love it anyway. It's just it's fun, it's entertaining. Yeah, and again, I love that this is a directing point, during the kind of big fight with the dinosaur, whatever it may be, and Kong, that it's a massively long action-packed scene where they don't put background music on it. It's just the kind of grunts and roars of the two creatures fighting, and I was like, that's surprising, because nowadays, you know, they would put like Star Trek original series type fight music in the background or something for them. Kirk and Spock on Vulcan style or something, but they don't. It's just like it's allowed to play out as like, look at this incredible spectacle, and it really helps.
I'm now tempted to superimpose that music on that scene.
DK, take us away then. You've got a fair amount, I think, on the special effects and the production.
Yeah, the 18-inch model of King Kong. It was made from a metal mesh skeleton, a mixture of rubber and foam for the muscle structure, and rabbit fur for the hair. Now, for the scenes of Anne in Kong's hand, the hand was attached to a crane and raised 10 feet. First, a technician put her in the hand and closed the fingers around her. Then the hand was lifted for filming. She would later say her terror in those scenes was real. The more she struggled, the looser the hand's grip grew. When she thought she was about to fall, she had to signal Marion C. Cooper to stop filming.
Credit to Fia Ray again for that.
Yeah, she was a trooper on this.
Real danger.
Kong's special effects utilized every then known combination of film technology as well as some innovations. There was the recently designed practical large rear screen projection and the new miniature rear projection, the latter used for some stop motion tabletop shots. The Dunning travelling map process, the Williams early travelling map process, which was updated and improved in 1932, and optical effects created by the relatively new optical printer. Linwood Dunn, later in charge of the optical effects department and one of three to develop RKO's own optical printer, worked out specific optical printer shots with Willis O'Brien and Cooper. Glass matte paintings were placed in separate layers on the miniature stop-motion sets to achieve a realistic, in-depth setting. And finally, there was the imaginative and inventive use of combining the techniques. Now, the metal armature for one of the stop-motion puppets used to portray Kong still exists, and it's currently owned by film buff Bob Burns, who has a cameo role in the remake King Kong 2005.
Wow.
I've seen it. It's really cool looking as well.
The film stop motion effects by Willis H. O'Brien revolutionized special effects, leaving a lasting impact on the film industry worldwide, and inspired other genre films such as Mighty Joe Young, Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, Creature from the Black Lagoon, Mothra, and Jurassic Park. The film was also one of the biggest inspirations for Godzilla, with Tomoyuki Tanaka, the creator of Godzilla, stating, "I felt like doing something big. That was my motivation. I thought of different ideas. I like monster movies, and I was influenced by King Kong."
So interesting. Yeah, more on that potentially later. So yeah, we see how these creatures have been linked from the beginning. I don't really have anything to add to the kind of production because I talked about it, I think, mainly during the direction. So do you guys have anything to add to specifically VFX and things?
No, I pretty much mentioned them during the direction also.
Yeah, so that I mean, I think that the effects, were excellent and above and beyond what anyone has seen at that time. So yeah, definitely fantastic.
They're obviously dated now, but when you look at
them,
they hold up surprisingly well. I mean, I know you can say they're dated, but for me, maybe it's because I'm an old fogey. But for me, I think it still holds up surprisingly well for such an old movie. Anyway.
I think that we don't have what we have today without the techniques of the past. So we can't really say, oh, these techniques are, outdated. And they might not be used anymore today, but they are definitely important to what we have today.
Oh, definitely. And I'd much rather watch this than Birdemic again.
To the music and the sound is the next section. I'm going to start us off, and I think DK, you've got a little bit after that. I'll just tell you that Murray Spivak provided the sound effects for the film. Kong's roar was created by mixing the recorded vocals of captive lions and tigers, subsequently played backwards slowly. Spivak himself provided Kong's quote-unquote love grunts by grunting into a megaphone and playing it at a slow speed. That's interesting. That's how I pulled my...
I'm going to use that phrase.
For the
love grunts.
Yeah, all right.
That's class.
Let's form a band and call it Love Grunts.
Love Grunts.
That's our new name. We're not the Simian Squad. We're Love Grunts.
Yes, I love it.
This is great. For the huge ape's footsteps, Spivak stomped across a gravel-filled box with plungers wrapped in foam attached to his feet. Oh, I wish I could have seen footage of this. While the sound of his chest beats were recorded by Spivak hitting his assistant, who had a microphone held to his back, on the chest with a drumstick. Poor guy. Spivak created the hisses and croaks of the dinosaurs with an air compressor for the former and his own vocals for the latter. The vocalizations of the Tyrannosaurus, apparently it's an allosaurus, were additionally mixed in with puma growls, while bird squawks were used for the Pteranodon. Kind of figures. Spivak also provided the numerous screams of the various sailors, and Fia Ray provided all her screams in a single recording session. DK, take it away.
Yeah, the score was unlike any that came before, and it marked a significant change in the history of film music. King Kong's score was the first feature-length musical score written for an American talkie. The first major Hollywood film to have a thematic score rather than background music. the first to mark the use of a 46-piece orchestra, and the first to be recorded on 3 separate tracks, which were sound effects, dialogue, and music. Steiner used a number of new film scoring techniques, such as drawing upon opera conventions for his use of leitmotifs. Over the years, Steiner's score was recorded by multiple record labels, and the original motion picture soundtrack has been issued on a compact disc, and that's a physical medium for all you youngsters out there.
It's like a physical version of an MP3 file.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got to say, I don't have many notes, but I will say I love the score to this film. It's very evocative, and I just love old film scores. I just think maybe because you were just outside of the silent era where that's all they had, but I think they're just so memorable, and they echo so well. They're much more kind of haunting. And this is just, again, it's one of the film scores I can close my eyes and picture exactly which scene it's representing and be transported back there. And I think they did a great job. And as for the sound effects, I just find it deeply amusing. Some of the incredibly gonzo techniques they were using, including hitting a poor assistant and using plungers strapped to your feet. I just can't imagine that ever happening nowadays, but
I want to get Foley work.
Yeah, exactly, right? Imagine being paid for that. Cool. If you are familiar with us here on Cinema Classics, you'll know that unlike our other kind of sub-shows in the silver screen, we don't really do an audience response because they're classics and it's generally assumed, that it's going to be quite well received, though some of the attitudes in this one are not particularly well looked on. But regardless, as I said, being Cinema Classics, we do more of a critic response because I'm always intrigued by what critics thought at the time and sometimes since. So I have the information here. There's not a lot, but I'm going to just quickly go through the response to this film and tell you that on Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds an approval rating of 97% based on 112 reviews with an average rating of 9 out of 10. The site's critical consensus reads, King Kong explores the soul of a monster, making audiences scream and cry throughout the film, in large part due to Kong's breakthrough special effects. On Metacritic, the film has a weighted average score of 92 out of 100 based on 12 critics, indicating universal acclaim. Variety thought the film was a powerful adventure. The New York Times gave readers an enthusiastic account of the plot and thought the film was a fascinating adventure. John Mosher of The New Yorker called it ridiculous, but wrote that there were many scenes in this picture that are certainly diverting. The New York World Telegram said it was one of the very best of all the screen thrillers, done with all the cinema's slickest camera tricks. The Chicago Tribune called it one of the most original, thrilling, and mammoth novelties to emerge from a movie studio. On February 3rd, 2002, Roger Ebert included King Kong in his great movies list, writing that in modern times, the movie has aged, as critic James Berardinelli observes, and advances in technology and acting have dated aspects of the production. Yes, but in the very artificiality of some of the special effects, there is a creepiness that isn't there in today's slick, flawless, computer-aided images. Agreed. Even allowing for its slow start, wooden acting, and wall-to-wall screaming, there's something ageless and primeval about King Kong that still somehow works. And get your drinks ready, people. Are we ready with our alcoholic beverages? Because in 1991, this movie was deemed culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant by the Library of Congress and selected for preservation in the National Film Registry. It's ranked by Rotten Tomatoes as the greatest horror film of all time and the 56th greatest film of all time. A sequel of Kong was made the same year as the original film, and several more films have been made, including 2 remakes in 1976 and 2005. All have been fairly well received. So, yeah. Any thoughts on any of that? Does any of that surprise you guys? Or
no, that seems just about right.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Awesome. I'll move us along then, because all that's left for us to give is for us to give our opinions. And on my versions of the silver screen, I always begin that by asking for your favorite character, moment, and line in the movie. So I'm going to go around to our guest first and ask Nita, who was your favorite character in the movie and why?
Aside from King Kong, because obviously he is the star, I actually really like the female character. I think she was definitely brave, and she took chances, which is something that in those times was not really common. And so it showed a woman being strong and in the sense that she was brave, and she faced horrendous situations, being a part of this, and she survived it. And I think that that's something that um, is not given a lot of credit to in her character. Um,
Yeah.
you know, so
Yeah,
I
definitely.
really enjoy her a lot.
Awesome. What about you, DK? And you can't say King Homer.
Damn. I'm going to agree with Nita. It's Anne Darrow, because for all the times that they, downplay her because she's a woman, as Nita says, she goes through some horrendous situations. I mean, the end alone, where he places her on top of the Empire State Building. If John had turned up to rescue me, the first thing that came out of my mouth would have been, "I soiled myself," and that would have been it. So yeah, she's really good.
While
I
watching
think
it this time, it occurred to me this time watching it that like she's very lucky that Kong put her back down before falling off the building, because they didn't seem all that concerned that there was a chance he could have taken her with him. Like, he's holding her at one point when he's like lolling back and forth, and I'm kind of like, dude, put her down. You know what I
But
mean?
I think that's what hammers home the fact that he was more human than anyone else in this.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I don't think he had any ill intent towards his companions, because he protects them.
I think he just likes blondes. But
Um,
I gave a lot of thought to favorite character because I wanted to go with Anne Darrow, but I just thought there's too many things about her character that are problematic in terms of the subservience and stuff. I wanted to go with Kong for his kind of moments of pathos and stuff, but my word, he kills a lot of people. I just can't really get on board with that.
I still cannot get over that log scene. They're just dropping like
flies.
weights. It's just, oh my god! And there goes another one.
I mean, that wasn't the most brutal part. Like I said, for me, it was kind of the people who have done nothing wrong in their little kind of makeshift shack homes, and he's just pulling them out and stamping on them and like pushing them into the ground with his foot like he's putting out a cigarette butt or something. It's like, dude, they did nothing to you. Relax. But yeah. So in the end, I went with Carl Denham because I didn't have very many options, and I did find the character to be kind of fun and had a bit more depth and backstory to him. So
yeah, you really need to check out the sequel, man.
Fair enough. I keep meaning to, but it's really hard to find. I will one day. So what is the favorite moment or scene in the movie, Nita?
my favorite moment, honestly, was when they're in like that cave and he puts her down, and all of a sudden this like gigantic anaconda comes out of the water, and he is killing him, but there is a struggle going on because this thing is strong, and she takes that opportunity to run.
Yeah,
of course she has nowhere to go, she's on a cliff, but she tries. And I thought that was pretty fantastic. I love the fight scenes that they show with Khan. I think that those are so amazingly done. Definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah, couldn't agree more. What about you, DK? Your favorite moment or scene?
It's extremely predictable, but I'm going to go with the Empire State and the biplane.
I really wanted to go with that, but I didn't because I thought it was just too predictable and obvious. And in the end, I think slightly that my choice tops it, and it is the fight with the T-Rex or Allosaurus, whatever it is. Because I just think that whole fight is it's amazing. It lasts a surprisingly long time, especially when you consider how difficult it is to make. It's just completely compelling to me. I love every move, and I could just watch it time and time again and be suckered in and believe this is, a dinosaur and a big gorilla. So I love that. And Nita, do you have a favorite line from the film that comes to mind?
Favorite line. I think it's hilarious when she describes the captain. What was it that she said? She said that
he's a charming old man or something, she says.
A lamb. He's such a lamb. Yes, I thought that was hilarious. Because she goes, "Don't you think?" And he looked at her like,
"Don't let him hear you say that."
And he'll throw me overboard if I said that. Like, he has this look at his face. I thought that whole scene was actually kind of cute, and appropriate for the time and how women would have expressed themselves. Today, a woman wouldn't have expressed themselves that way, but it's just because language changes and expressions change.
Yeah.
But her calling the captain a lamb was just the
That's
funniest
cool.
moment.
Awesome. What about you, DK? And I'm worried you're going to have the same as me, but I'm going to throw it open to you.
I know we're going to have the same, so I'm going to let
I
you say
bet
it
we do.
first.
Okay. My favorite line is when they're on the ship watching all of the commotion happening. And
Oh shit! It's not.
Okay, it's not. Well, in that case, I'll
Go
still
on,
go
then.
first. So yeah, I couldn't help but laugh, especially in this day and age when they see all of the crazy shenanigans, and one of the guys just was, "Yeah, it looks like the night before election."
Yes.
Go on, then. What's yours?
It's entirely predictable, but it's the old.
Okay.
It wasn't the airplanes. It was Beauty killed the Beast.
That's very obvious, but okay, fair enough. Awesome. Right. So then all we have to do to kind of finish things here is to give our conclusion and our score out of 5 stars. And again, we always begin with our guests. So Nita, do you have a conclusion and a score for me, please?
I think that there's a lot of history in this movie, not just cultural history, but cinematic history that can be learned and should never be forgotten. And this is amazing. And to see who we were and who we are is an amazing sense of progress. I know this is probably going to come as a surprise, given what I've said thus far about the movie, but I'm going to give it a 10.
A 5.
10.
So 5
No,
out of 5.
a 10.
Awesome.
It's a 10. It's a 10.
10 out of 5?
Okay.
You broke the system, Nita.
I broke the system.
Awesome.
It is
I am
one
shocked.
of the best classic movies. Though they have a lot of tropes and problematic issues, yeah, but that's so true about so many of movies in that time. There's no difference in that aspect, but I really truly believe this is an amazing movie that we can get a lot of information out of. Mm-hmm.
Cool. That's fantastic. I'm happy to hear you enjoyed it. DK, what about you, please?
Mine's a short one. Over 90 years old, and it still looks great. And a great deal more gruesome than I remember. Little Wonder Kong was viewed as one of the legendary Hollywood monsters. Yes, the effects and attitudes have dated, but like I always say, to see this in the cinema at the time would have been mind-blowing. It's iconic, and it's iconic for a reason, and I've given it 4.5.
Oh, fantastic work. Okay, I'm going to go next then. I said, I love this movie. I don't think you can understate its importance. Aside from the technical analysis, though, it just comes together to form a kind of cinematic magic, captivating audiences for nearly a century, as DK said, and somehow it holds up for me. Okay, the effects aren't always the most convincing, but I still just believe them. I admire the craftsmanship, I get swept up, and I just enjoy watching. The film's a little bit slower to start than I remember, with some clunky acting and setup, but from the first moment the title character appears on screen until the end, it's just thrilling. I love the various island fights, the tech wizardry, the little touches, and I do suspend disbelief. And even after multiple watches, my heart is in my throat watching the Empire State Building finale. There's so much I adore here, but I'd be lying if I said it was perfect. It may seem a bit redundant to criticize attitudes from so long ago, but the treatment and representation of women and non-whites is really hard to watch nowadays without grimacing. For a film, though, from 1933 to have little else to complain about is still very impressive, and I can still put myself in the shoes of an audience, like DK said, that must have been absolutely wowed by the things they saw on screen. It's one of the key films that made me fall in love with movies, and I suspect I'm not alone on that. And I also gave it 4.5 out of 5. Like I said, it's a shame about the parts that have dated attitude wise, but I can't ignore them, unfortunately, much as I really do adore this movie. So yeah, putting those together, dividing by the 3 of us here, gives a final score for the classic King Kong of 4.6 out of 5. So yeah,
Wow,
very good.
I can't fault that. Another thumbs up for the Apes.
Yeah, we
that's
do love our
right.
primates. Awesome. Yeah, thanks, guys. That was fantastic. So, as we say, good night, sweet prince, and ponder which poor city worker is going to have to clean up a humongous ape carcass, it just remains for me to thank our guest, Nita. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me, guys. Always
Anytime.
Always fun
Yeah,
and proud
anytime.
to be part of the Simian crew.
We've established we're love grunts now.
Yes, rawr, we're love grunts. We're love grunts.
We're
yes.
a punk band
That's
called Love Grunts.
perfect.
We-
We're a
we-
punk band called Love
We could be the Simian Squad featuring Love Grunts.
Yes,
Let's just
I
go
like
all
that.
80s about it.
Yes,
Love
I
it.
think that will be the perfect podcast name right there.
Awesome. So, Nita, I know you wanted to shout out presumably the Sci-Fi Queens podcast, fabulous as it is, and you're recording today. So where can people find you
Yeah.
and your podcast?
Yes, you can find us at the our YouTube channel. It's Sci-Fi Queens, and today we're actually having a special. Usually our episodes are on Friday, but today it's going to be today at 6 p.m. Eastern time, where we're going to be celebrating Star Trek Day and the women of Star Trek. So I hope you guys join us.
Well,
And check
by the
it
time this
out.
goes out, it will be long over, but they can certainly watch the replay.
But they can go back.
Absolutely,
It'll
yeah.
be always on
Wouldn't
our
be Star
YouTube
Trek if you
channel.
couldn't time travel every now and then, would it? Yeah,
That's right. You can time travel back to the live.
that's fantastic. You're always doing lives though, and you and the ladies on the podcast are great. So thoroughly recommend that.
Oh,
And,
thank you.
we'll
Thank you
leave,
so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will leave the link in the description to your channels and everything as well. And as always, thanks for being my stalwart first mate on this podcast venture. No pun intended. DK, thanks for joining us.
No worries. No worries.
Wait, does that make me the screaming woman?
No. Well, you've got a very limited range of choices. You could be the very racist Chinese cook if you want. But, you know,
Oh, no.
not sure I'd want to be that.
I don't want to be that one. I will gladly be the screaming woman.
I think there was like another sailor that you saw briefly, like a young lad that was on the ship. Or you could be the lamb captain if you think you can grow a convincing enough beard.
I can't. I really can't. I will stick to screaming woman.
Okay, well, we'll allow it. That does it for this episode. But stay tuned because the very next Silver Screen episode concludes our Kaiju trilogy as DK's Cult Classics takes the baton and jumps forward a couple of decades and over to Japan for a review of another OG, 1954's Godzilla, or Gojira if you prefer. I won't ask DK where you can find him because I always pop up on screen if I'm editing, which I am, a sort of card that you can see on YouTube with all the links to all of our various social medias and things. Would take too long to go through them all, but it will be on screen for you if you're there. And if you are listening and not watching, you will always find our link tree in the episode description, which will direct you to all the places you need to go. You can contact me or the podcast via those, and I'll always make sure DK gets a message if you have anything you wanted to send on to him. So, yeah. Join us again for that next episode, as I said, which not only concludes our Kaiju trilogy, but also kicks off an October month of monsters. DK, would you like to elaborate further on that or leave it as a mystery?
No. We'll leave it as is.
Oh,
Just be
awesome.
there.
So,
Just be there. There's some good stuff coming.
Absolutely. There's a lot coming. And Cinema Classics will be back on the same month to join that spooky party with a review of a particular iconic Hitchcock movie. I'll leave it.
I love that movie.
I'm pretty sure you can work it out from that. But yeah, awesome. Join us again then. And in the meantime, remember, and yes, I had to say it, it wasn't the airplanes. It was beauty killed the beast. Good night.
Insert love grunts here.
You've been listening to the Silver Screen Podcast, hosted by Michael Wilson and DK. Produced and edited by Mike Wilson. Additional material and behind-the-scenes sections by DK. Follow us on social media. Links to all of our social media pages can be found via the Linktree page listed in the episode's description. This podcast is part of the Mike's Podcast Network. You can listen to this and our sister podcasts on all good podcast providers by searching for Silver Screen Podcast or Mike's Podcasts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share far and wide. Thank you for joining us. Come back next time for more movie magic, and hopefully this can be the beginning of a beautiful friendship.